It had been a long, tiring day, and she was walking home with the weight of exhaustion pressing on her shoulders. The city streets were quieting down as the evening crept in, and the fading light made the tall buildings cast long, soft shadows on the pavement. Her mind was filled with thoughts about the day's work, deadlines, and the small frustrations that had accumulated like tiny pebbles in her pocket. She tried to shake it off, taking deep breaths and feeling the crisp air on her face. She had always believed that even on the hardest days, a walk home could bring some clarity, some relief, if only for a few minutes. As she turned a corner, she noticed a small crowd gathering near a broken-down car. It was unusual for this part of the city to have traffic issues at this hour. Curious, she slowed down, trying to understand what was happening. As she drew closer, she saw a man crouched near the car's engine, his brow furrowed and hands stained with oil. Next to him stood a little girl, no older than 7 or 8, holding a small backpack and looking anxious. She watched the scene for a few moments, trying to gauge whether help was needed. The man looked up, meeting her gaze, and she saw a tired smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Without thinking too much, she walked over and asked if they needed help. The man straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag he had brought with him. He explained that the car had broken down and they were stranded. He sounded calm, but there was an underlying worry in his voice. The little girl tugged at his sleeve, and he glanced down at her before responding. She noticed the way he looked at her daughter, a mix of fatigue, worry, and love. It was a look that told her he was someone who cared deeply, someone who would do anything for his child. She offered to call a tow service, but he shook his head, explaining that the nearest station was far away and they had no money to spare. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, and then looked at her with a mixture of hope and embarrassment. It was clear he didn't want to impose, but he had no other options. She felt a surge of empathy for them. She didn't know their story, but she knew what it felt like to be stuck, to have no one to turn to feel helpless. After a brief pause, she made a decision. She told them they could come to her apartment for the night. It wasn't much, just a small place with a guest room that had a simple bed and some basic furniture, but it was warm, safe, and dry. The man's eyes widened in surprise, and the little girl's face lit up with a hopeful smile. They hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of being a burden, but she reassured them that it was no trouble at all. She could see the tension ease slightly in their shoulders, and she felt a small sense of satisfaction knowing she could help. As they walked together to her apartment, the man explained that he had been traveling for work and had been planning to reach a small town nearby, but the car's breakdown had thrown everything off. The little girl, shy at first, clung to her father's hand but eventually glanced at her with curious eyes. She smiled warmly at the child, who returned it with a timid nod. It was a small connection, but it felt meaningful. Sometimes it was these little moments that reminded you of the simple goodness in people. Once they arrived, she showed them the guest room and helped them get settled. The man thanked her quietly, his voice tinged with relief and gratitude. The little girl explored the room briefly before sitting on the bed, her small hands clasped together as if she were still unsure if this was real. She smiled at the girl and told her to make herself comfortable. The warmth of her words seemed to ease some of the child's anxiety. There was a soft silence for a moment, filled only by the distant hum of the city outside and the occasional creak of the old apartment building. She then prepared a simple dinner, pulling together ingredients from her small kitchen. The man and his daughter watched her work, expressing polite curiosity about the food and the cooking process. She served them with a smile, and they ate quietly at first, but gradually conversation started to flow. The little girl asked about her job, about her life, and she answered in simple, honest words. She noticed the sparkle in the girl's eyes and felt a sense of warmth she hadn't experienced in a long time. The father joined in, telling small stories about their travels and their life together. There was laughter, small and tentative at first, but genuine. It was the kind of laughter that filled the empty corners of a room and made the world feel a little lighter. After dinner, they sat together in the living room. The little girl curled up on the sofa, leaning against her father's side, and he looked at her with a quiet pride. She noticed the softness in his eyes, a tenderness that spoke volumes about their bond. They shared stories about childhood, dreams, and fears. She found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with strangers before. The conversation flowed naturally, with no pretenses, no masks. It was refreshing, grounding, and real. The night grew deeper, and she showed them where they could sleep. The father expressed his gratitude again, his voice steady but sincere. The little girl hugged her briefly before settling down, and she watched them with a sense of fulfillment. It was a simple act of kindness, but it had created a space of safety, warmth, and trust. She knew that they were strangers, but in that moment they felt like family. She reflected on how small actions, simple choices, and moments of empathy could create connections that were unexpectedly profound. Before turning in herself, she checked on them once more, making sure they were comfortable. The little girl had already fallen asleep, and the father was sitting quietly looking at her with a mixture of gratitude and contemplation. She smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of peace. That night, in her small apartment, 3 strangers had come together, and in doing so, they had created a shared moment of human kindness that would linger in their memories for a long time. As she lay in her own bed, she thought about the randomness of life, how chance encounters could change the course of someone's day or even life. She felt a quiet hope that this small act of helping someone in need would make a difference, even if she never saw it directly. There was a simple beauty in the idea that kindness could ripple out in ways we could never predict. And with that thought, sleep finally came, gentle and undisturbed, carrying with it the quiet satisfaction of having made a small, meaningful impact in someone else's life. The next morning started quietly. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting a soft golden glow across the small apartment. She woke early, as was her habit, and for a few moments she just lay in bed listening to the faint sounds of the city coming to life. The soft hum of traffic, a distant horn, the muffled chatter of early risers. These ordinary noises felt comforting, grounding, as if they reminded her that life went on, even after the strange and unexpected events of the previous night. She quietly moved around the apartment, careful not to wake the little girl or her father. She brewed some coffee, enjoying the aroma that filled the kitchen, and then began to prepare a simple breakfast. Toast, eggs, and fruit. Nothing fancy, just enough to provide energy for the day ahead. The father and daughter eventually joined her in the kitchen, the little girl still rubbing sleep from her eyes. She smiled gently at them, and the girl smiled back, shy but more relaxed than the night before. The father nodded in thanks, his eyes reflecting a quiet relief that only someone who has faced unexpected hardship could show. Breakfast was a slow and easy meal, filled with small talk and laughter. The little girl asked questions about her work, about the city, about how she lived alone. She answered simply, honestly, without exaggeration or pretense, and the little girl listened with wide, curious eyes. The father occasionally joined in, his voice calm and steady, adding his own stories, little anecdotes about travel or memories from the past. They spoke of ordinary things, jobs, daily routines, small dreams, but each word carried weight because they were shared sincerely. After breakfast, they discussed what to do about the car. The father explained that the nearest repair shop was far and that they would need some help to get there. She offered to accompany them, not because it was necessary, but because she felt a natural desire to help. The little girl held her hand tightly, and she felt a surge of protectiveness, a simple instinct to care for someone who was so trusting and innocent. On the way to the repair shop, the city seemed alive in ways it often didn't during her rushed commutes. The streets were quieter, the sun shining warmly, the sounds of life creating a rhythm that felt almost magical. They walked together talking about small things, the clouds, the birds, the smells of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. The little girl giggled at small jokes, and the father smiled more easily, clearly appreciating the simple joy in her presence. Arriving at the repair shop, the father explained the situation to the mechanic while she waited with the little girl. She listened to the child's chatter about school, friends, and her favorite games. It was easy to lose track of time in these moments, to forget the outside world's stress and complications. They laughed together at small, innocent jokes, and she realized how important these little connections were, how much light they could bring into ordinary days. When the car was finally ready, the father checked the repairs and thanked the mechanic, paying as best as he could manage. They were ready to continue their journey, and she felt a bittersweet feeling. She wanted to help more, to spend more time, yet she knew their paths would eventually diverge. Walking back to her apartment, she noticed how the city felt warmer, somehow more alive than before. Small acts of kindness, she realized, created ripples in unexpected ways. Back at her apartment, she helped them pack and get ready for departure. The little girl hugged her tightly, a small, genuine gesture of gratitude that made her heart swell. The father shook her hand firmly, his eyes meeting hers in a silent acknowledgement of her kindness. They left with smiles, their spirits lifted by the warmth and care she had shown them. She waved as they walked away, feeling a strange mixture of happiness and melancholy. She had made a difference, even if it was just for one night. And that knowledge felt deeply satisfying. The day continued, but she couldn't shake the memory of their faces, the sound of their laughter, and the quiet gratitude in their eyes. Her mind wandered back to the little girl's questions, the father's stories, and the way they had trusted her so easily. It was a reminder that human connection could be simple, profound, and transformative, even in the smallest gestures. She carried that thought with her throughout the day, noticing the world with a slightly different perspective, seeing opportunities to offer help or kindness wherever she could. By evening, she felt an unusual sense of fulfillment. She reflected on how brief interactions could leave lasting impressions, how lives could intertwine for just a moment and still create deep bonds. The father and daughter were strangers, yet in those few hours, they had become part of her life in a meaningful way. She felt a quiet anticipation, wondering if their paths would ever cross again, and hoping that the warmth and care she had shown would stay with them as it stayed with her. She realized that life was full of surprises, and sometimes the smallest choices could have the most profound effects, offering a helping hand, sharing a meal, creating a safe space. These were acts that didn't require wealth, influence, or power. They required only compassion and courage, and in that realization she felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet determination to continue living with empathy, openness, and kindness no matter where life took her next. As night fell, she sat by her window looking out at the city lights. The streets were quieter now, the buildings casting long shadows in the soft glow of the street lamps. She thought about the father and daughter, hoping they had continued safely on their journey. A small smile touched her lips, and she felt a deep, serene satisfaction. It was a simple truth she now carried in her heart. Helping others, even in small ways, could create warmth, connection, and a sense of meaning that lingered far beyond the moment itself. Weeks passed after that evening when she had helped the father and his daughter. Life at her company returned to its usual rhythm, filled with long hours, meetings, deadlines, and the endless hum of computers and phones. Yet even in the middle of her busy days, she found herself thinking of them occasionally. The little girl's bright eyes, the father's quiet dignity, and the warmth of that brief night they had shared. It was a memory that brought a subtle smile to her face, a reminder of the simple joys and human connections that existed beyond her routine. One morning, the office buzzed with excitement. An all-staff email had announced a major change in the company's leadership. A new CEO had been appointed. Employees whispered and speculated, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. Rumors filled the air about who this person might be, what changes would come, and how the workplace dynamics might shift. She felt a strange flutter of anticipation, mixed with the usual caution she carried when facing unexpected developments. Change always brought uncertainty, and she knew that. The day of the official meeting arrived. Employees gathered in the large conference room, murmuring quietly. The atmosphere was filled with a mix of curiosity and anxiety, each person wondering what the future might hold under this new leadership. As she found her seat, she noticed a figure stepping up to the front, and her heart nearly skipped a beat. It was him, the father from that night. Her mind struggled to process the revelation. The man who had seemed ordinary, vulnerable, and in need of help was now standing in front of the entire company as the new CEO. For a moment, she was frozen, unable to react. Memories of that night, the laughter, the conversations, the trust shared between strangers flooded her mind. The contrast between the man she had helped and the powerful, confident leader in front of her was striking. Yet the warmth she remembered in his eyes was still there. It was subtle but unmistakable. He smiled gently as he began to speak, his voice calm yet authoritative, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. He introduced himself to the company, outlining his vision and goals. There was no arrogance in his tone, no show of power for its own sake. He spoke with sincerity, sharing ideas about collaboration, empathy, and innovation. Employees listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging curious glances. She found herself drawn to the authenticity of his words, recognizing the same humanity she had witnessed that night. It was rare to see someone so influential remain grounded and approachable. and it left a lasting impression on her. Throughout the meeting, she observed him closely. The little details caught her attention: the way he made eye contact with employees, the subtle gestures of respect and acknowledgement, the quiet smiles he offered to those who spoke. He was clearly a man of experience and intellect, yet he had not lost the kindness and humility she had glimpsed before. It was a rare combination, and it made her feel a mix of admiration and wonder. She realized that people were often more complex than they appeared, and that first impressions could be misleading. After the meeting, she returned to her desk, still trying to process what had just happened. The office hummed with discussions, speculation, and the usual busyness, but her mind kept drifting back to him. She thought about the little girl, imagining how she might react to seeing her father in this new public role. She felt a renewed respect for the father she had helped, recognizing that his life was far richer and more challenging than she had imagined. It was a humbling reminder that everyone carried unseen stories, struggles, and triumphs. Over the following days, she observed his leadership style. He was attentive, approachable, and willing to listen, yet firm when needed. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding the people who worked for him, learning about their experiences, strengths, and challenges. She found herself quietly inspired by his approach, seeing the impact of empathy and genuine care in a professional setting. It reinforced the lessons she had learned that night about the importance of kindness and human connection. One afternoon, she found herself in the elevator with him. It was a brief encounter, but it felt significant. He greeted her with a nod and a warm smile, and she returned it feeling a mix of recognition and disbelief. For a moment, they shared a silent understanding, a memory unspoken but acknowledged. The little girl's voice echoed in her mind, the innocence and trust that had marked that night still vivid. It was a reminder that even fleeting moments could leave lasting impressions, shaping perceptions and relationships in subtle but meaningful ways. In the weeks that followed, she noticed small ways their paths crossed. Sometimes it was in the cafeteria, where they exchanged a few words about everyday matters. Other times it was brief conversations in the hallways, about work or shared observations about life. Each encounter was brief, but it carried a sense of familiarity and warmth. She realized that the human connection they had formed, though born from circumstance, was enduring. It was a bond built not on professional hierarchy, but on genuine respect, empathy, and understanding. The story of that night began to take on new meaning. She reflected on how a simple act of kindness had unknowingly touched someone whose life was vastly different from her own. She marveled at the interconnectedness of life, the way small gestures could ripple through time, creating unexpected consequences and opportunities. It was a lesson she carried quietly, letting it influence the way she approached her own work, her interactions with colleagues, and her daily life. As days turned into weeks, she found herself more observant, more attuned to the small details that made life meaningful. She noticed moments of struggle and triumph in others, offering help and encouragement when she could. She realized that empathy was a skill, a choice and a practice, not just an instinct. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, contributed to a larger sense of community and connection. And in that realization, she felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her life, too, had been enriched by the chance encounter that had started it all. Even as the office continued its daily rhythm, she held on to the memory of the father and daughter, the night they had shared, and the profound yet simple lesson it had taught her, that human connection, trust, and kindness could transcend circumstances, hierarchy, and expectation. It was a truth that remained with her, quietly shaping her perspective, her actions, and her understanding of the world. And in that understanding, she found a sense of hope, purpose, and fulfillment that was both grounding and uplifting, a reminder that life's most meaningful moments often arrived unexpectedly, and that the bonds we form, even in passing, could change us forever. Over the following weeks, subtle moments allowed her to reconnect with the man who had once been a stranger in need and was now her company's CEO. It began with chance encounters in the corridors, brief conversations over coffee, and small exchanges in the cafeteria. Each interaction felt natural, unforced, and gradually built a quiet familiarity between them. She could see glimpses of the man she had known, the same kindness, calm, and warmth beneath the layers of professional authority he now carried. It was a reminder that people were complex, that the roles they played in public life did not erase the humanity they carried within. One rainy afternoon, as she walked to her car, she saw him standing under a large umbrella, waiting near the entrance. He greeted her with a gentle smile, and she returned it, feeling a strange mix of surprise and comfort. They exchanged small talk, commenting on the weather and the busy streets, but there was an unspoken understanding in their eyes. The memory of the night she had offered them shelter lingered quietly between them, unspoken but acknowledged. It was as if that shared experience had created a silent bond, one that did not require words to validate its existence. Over time, their conversations grew longer, more personal. He shared glimpses of his life, the challenges of being a single father and the quiet joys he found in small moments with his daughter. She listened attentively, offering her thoughts and empathy without judgment or expectation. In return, she found herself opening up about her own experiences, her dreams, and the small struggles that filled her days. There was a mutual respect, a sense of trust that had formed organically from shared understanding rather than circumstance or hierarchy. She learned how devoted he was to his daughter, how he balanced the responsibilities of parenthood with the pressures of his career. He spoke softly about the nights he spent working after she had gone to bed, the quiet pride he felt in her accomplishments, and the worries that often kept him awake. His honesty and vulnerability created a safe space, a rare opportunity to see beyond the public persona into the heart of a person who carried immense responsibility with quiet grace. The little girl, too, became a part of her life, though indirectly at first. She would occasionally receive small notes or drawings delivered to her desk, gifts of appreciation and trust from the child who had once been timid and shy. Each gesture brought warmth to her heart, a reminder that the bonds formed in kindness could extend in unexpected ways. She found herself thinking of them often, wondering how they were faring, and feeling a quiet joy at their small triumphs and simple pleasures. One evening, he invited her to join them for dinner at a small, quiet restaurant. It was not formal or ostentatious, just a chance to share a meal in the company of someone she had come to admire and care for. Sitting across from him and his daughter, she felt the ease of familiarity, the comfort of being in a space where judgment was absent and kindness was abundant. The little girl chatted freely, asking questions and telling stories, while he guided the conversation with gentle humor and warmth. It was an ordinary evening made extraordinary by the connection and trust that had grown over weeks of shared moments. During that dinner, she noticed how naturally he interacted with others, how he balanced attentiveness with authority, kindness with decisiveness. It was clear that his role as CEO did not define him entirely. It was simply one aspect of a multifaceted life. She realized that people could hold positions of power yet remain grounded, compassionate, and authentic. It was a lesson in humility and respect, one that she carried with her long after the meal had ended. As the weeks continued, she found herself more aware of the ripple effects of her actions. The small choice to offer them shelter had led to these connections, this unexpected friendship, and the chance to witness genuine human kindness at the highest levels of life. It reminded her that the impact of kindness was rarely immediate or obvious. It often unfolded slowly, quietly, and in ways that could surprise us. Each interaction reinforced her belief in the value of empathy, generosity, and the courage to act when someone was in need. The father and daughter shared glimpses of their lives with her, stories of laughter, small victories, and even moments of struggle. She listened without judgment, offering support, encouragement, and understanding. The little girl, once shy and reserved, now smiled freely in her presence, a testament to the comfort and trust that had grown between them. These moments were not monumental in the grand scheme of the world, but they were profound in their simplicity, demonstrating the quiet power of human connection. One afternoon, while walking together to a nearby park, they talked about dreams and aspirations, the kind of conversation that revealed hopes often hidden beneath the surface of daily life. She shared her ambitions, the challenges she faced, and the lessons she had learned. He listened intently, offering insights without pressure, wisdom without expectation. It was a dialogue that nourished the spirit, a reminder that understanding and empathy could create spaces where people felt safe to reveal their true selves. Through these moments, she discovered a sense of balance in her own life, witnessing his dedication as a father and a leader, and the little girl's growing confidence and joy inspired her to approach her own life with renewed perspective. She became more mindful of the small acts that mattered, the kind word, the listening ear, the willingness to help without expecting anything in return. These were the gestures that truly shaped human experience, far beyond titles, positions, or material wealth. Even as life continued its normal rhythm, the connection she had formed with them remained a guiding presence in her thoughts. It reminded her that meaningful relationships often arose unexpectedly, that trust and kindness could form the foundation for enduring bonds, and that empathy could bridge gaps between seemingly disparate lives. It was a quiet, steady lesson, one that informed her actions, her choices, and her understanding of what it meant to care for others. She reflected on how this relationship had evolved from a single night of kindness to a connection that transcended circumstances. It was rooted in genuine human understanding, in shared experiences, and in the simple, profound act of showing compassion when it was needed most. The father, the daughter, and she had formed a subtle yet unbreakable bond that would continue to shape their interactions, their perspectives, and their lives in ways that were meaningful, lasting, and deeply human. Through this journey, she learned that true connection was not about recognition, status, or obligation. It was about authenticity, openness, and the courage to care. It was about seeing another person fully, embracing their story, and offering support without expectation. In this, she found a quiet sense of fulfillment and a profound understanding of the beauty and significance of empathy, compassion, and the enduring power of human kindness. Months had passed since that night when she had first opened her door to a single father and his daughter. Life had grown more intricate and layered, filled with work responsibilities, social obligations, and the usual ebb and flow of everyday challenges. Yet amidst all this, the connection she had formed with them remained a constant, quiet presence that brought warmth and perspective to her life. It had evolved gradually, subtly, into a meaningful part of her world, shaped not by circumstance alone but by the shared trust and respect that had grown between them. The father had continued to balance his role as a single parent with his responsibilities as the CEO of a major company, a feat that demanded careful time management, unwavering dedication, and deep emotional resilience. She observed him navigating these pressures with a quiet determination that was inspiring. Despite the weight of his responsibilities, he remained approachable, kind, and empathetic, demonstrating that leadership was not only about authority and decisions, but also about humanity and connection. The little girl, too, thrived under his guidance, her confidence and joy reflecting the stability and love that had been cultivated over time. She found herself more involved in their lives in small, meaningful ways. Occasional dinners, short walks in the park, or casual conversations over coffee had become cherished moments. They spoke openly about hopes, dreams, and challenges, sharing pieces of themselves without pretense. She learned about the father's hopes for his daughter's future, the careful balance he sought between work and family, and the quiet pride he felt in her growing independence and happiness. In turn, she shared her own experiences, fears, and aspirations, finding in them a safe space where her voice could be heard and understood. The little girl, once shy and reserved, now displayed a natural ease in her presence. She would laugh freely, ask questions without hesitation, and express her thoughts openly. It was a testament to the trust and comfort that had developed, a reflection of the care and attention both the father and she had invested in nurturing a supportive and safe environment. These interactions, small and simple on the surface, carried profound significance. They illustrated how empathy, kindness, and genuine interest in others could foster growth, confidence, and resilience. One day, the father invited her to participate in a small family outing, a picnic in a quiet, scenic location away from the city. It was an ordinary activity, yet it held extraordinary meaning because it allowed them to experience life beyond their professional and personal routines. The little girl ran freely across the grassy field, laughing and playing, while the father prepared sandwiches and ensured everyone was comfortable. She observed the dynamics of their relationship, the effortless care and attentiveness the father displayed, and the joy and admiration in the little girl's eyes. It was a living example of love, patience, and dedication in action. During this outing, they shared stories and reflections about life, work, and relationships. They discussed the challenges of balancing personal ambitions with the responsibilities of caring for others, the importance of empathy in both professional and personal contexts, and the subtle ways in which human connection could transform everyday experiences. These conversations were not about grandeur or material success, but about understanding, respect, and mutual support, the elements that truly enriched lives. She realized that these values were not confined to family or personal life, but could also influence professional interactions and broader societal relationships. Back in the city, their interactions continued to grow organically. Work-related discussions were intertwined with personal conversations, each meeting or encounter infused with mutual respect and consideration. She began to notice how her perspective on life and work had shifted. The experience of connecting meaningfully with another person, witnessing their integrity and resilience, had deepened her empathy, enhanced her communication skills, and provided a broader understanding of human behavior. She approached colleagues, clients, and friends with a newfound patience and consideration, realizing that the small gestures of support and kindness could have lasting impacts. The father and she also collaborated on small projects at work, combining her skills and insights with his guidance and experience. These collaborations were not driven solely by professional objectives, but by a genuine respect for each other's abilities and viewpoints. She appreciated the way he valued her input, encouraged her growth, and provided constructive feedback. In turn, he benefited from her perspective, her creativity, and her keen understanding of the practical aspects of their work. This mutual exchange of ideas and support strengthened both their professional and personal rapport, creating a harmonious and productive dynamic. Beyond work, their friendship deepened. They shared quiet evenings talking about books, movies, and the simple pleasures of life. She learned about his childhood experiences, his early struggles, and the formative events that had shaped his values and character. He in turn learned about her own experiences, the small triumphs and challenges that had influenced her path. Through these exchanges, they developed a profound understanding of each other's lives, grounded not in assumptions or appearances, but in honest dialogue and attentive listening. The little girl continued to flourish in this environment. She displayed creativity, confidence, and a strong sense of empathy, qualities nurtured by the positive examples set by both the father and herself. They celebrated milestones together, whether it was a school achievement, a personal accomplishment, or a simple moment of recognition. These celebrations were intimate yet meaningful, reinforcing the importance of support, encouragement, and acknowledgement in fostering personal growth and resilience. Over time, she reflected on the broader impact of that one night of kindness. What had begun as a spontaneous decision to help a stranger in need had evolved into a relationship marked by trust, respect, and genuine affection. It had opened doors to understanding, personal growth, and professional collaboration that she could not have anticipated. She realized that life's most significant moments often arrived unexpectedly, and that the ripple effects of compassion could extend far beyond their initial context. The bond they shared became a source of quiet strength, a reminder of the importance of maintaining empathy, patience, and openness in every interaction. It taught her that human connection was not merely a function of circumstance or proximity, but a product of intention, sincerity, and attentiveness. The experience reinforced her belief in the transformative power of kindness and its ability to shape relationships, perspectives, and opportunities in meaningful and lasting ways. As the year drew to a close, she found herself reflecting on the journey she had shared with the father and daughter. She thought about the laughter, the conversations, the moments of quiet understanding, and the shared experiences that had enriched all their lives. She recognized the profound lesson that had emerged, that even small acts of compassion could create enduring bonds, influence personal and professional growth, and foster a sense of fulfillment that transcended everyday routines. In the end, the story of that night, the decision to offer shelter, the shared meals, the laughter, and the trust remained a touchstone in her life. It was a reminder that human connections, no matter how brief or seemingly ordinary, carried the potential to transform lives, inspire growth, and cultivate a sense of shared humanity. She felt gratitude for having been able to make a difference, for the lessons learned, and for the enduring relationships that had grown from a single act of kindness. And with that understanding, she approached each day with renewed empathy, awareness, and a commitment to nurturing the bonds that made life meaningful and profoundly human. Life had a way of moving forward in both expected and unexpected directions. Even after months of shared experiences, small joys, and growing bonds, she felt that the story of their connection was far from over. The father, now firmly established as the CEO of a major company, had responsibilities that weighed heavily on his shoulders, yet he remained approachable, kind, and devoted to his daughter. She admired how he managed to balance the pressures of work with the demands of parenting, showing grace, patience, and thoughtfulness at every turn. One crisp autumn morning, she arrived at work to find an unexpected invitation waiting for her on her desk. It was from him, asking if she would accompany him and his daughter on a weekend retreat to a countryside estate he had recently acquired. The invitation was casual yet thoughtful, emphasizing that it was simply a chance to relax, enjoy nature, and spend time together outside the usual routines of work and city life. She felt a flutter of excitement, curiosity, and anticipation. It was an opportunity to deepen their bond, to share experiences beyond the professional or logistical, and to witness the simple joys that often went unnoticed in the rush of everyday life. The journey to the countryside was serene, filled with rolling hills, golden leaves, and the gentle sounds of birds and rustling trees. The little girl sat in the back seat, chattering excitedly about everything she saw, asking questions, pointing out interesting things along the way. Her energy was contagious, filling the car with laughter and curiosity. The father occasionally glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his face softening with quiet pride and affection. She, seated in the front, watched them both with a sense of warmth and appreciation for the deep human connections that had grown naturally over time. Arriving at the estate, they were greeted by a charming house surrounded by gardens, a small pond, and winding paths lined with trees that glowed in the autumn sun. It was a place of calm, peace, and possibility. They settled in, unpacking, exploring the grounds, and taking in the tranquility. The father encouraged the little girl to play freely, and she did so with abandon, laughing, running, and exploring with the joy of a child in a safe and open space. She felt herself relaxing in their company, shedding the stresses and routines of her daily life, and embracing the simplicity and authenticity of the moment. Over the course of the weekend, they engaged in small, meaningful activities. Morning walks along tree-lined paths led to quiet conversations about hopes, dreams, and reflections on life. They shared meals prepared together, with the little girl helping in small ways and learning simple skills while enjoying the process. Each action was infused with connection, patience, and mutual respect. Even ordinary moments, sitting by the pond, tossing stones, watching the reflections of trees on the water, became opportunities for dialogue, laughter, and understanding. The father shared stories of his own childhood, his early struggles, and the lessons he had learned that had shaped his approach to life, work, and parenthood. She listened intently, absorbing his insights, asking questions, and reflecting on her own experiences. The little girl contributed with her innocent observations, often sparking humor and delight in both adults. It was a dynamic of learning, sharing, and mutual growth, where each person's perspective was valued and heard. As the weekend progressed, they found moments to discuss more personal topics. She shared thoughts about her aspirations, challenges at work, and the small victories that marked her progress. He listened without judgment, offering encouragement, guidance, and subtle insights that prompted reflection and growth. These conversations were not formal or structured. They flowed naturally, arising from the quiet trust and familiarity that had been nurtured over months. The little girl observed these exchanges, learning about communication, empathy, and respect through example. Evenings were spent around a fireplace, sharing stories and reflecting on the day. The warmth of the fire complemented the warmth of their connection. They spoke about the importance of kindness, the value of understanding others, and the subtle ways in which human connections could enrich life. She realized that this relationship had grown into a profound source of insight, perspective, and emotional nourishment. It had begun with a simple act of helping a stranger, and it had blossomed into a bond that transcended circumstance and title, rooted in authenticity, trust, and empathy. The little girl, ever curious and full of energy, often prompted discussions about life's small wonders. Questions about the stars, animals, nature, and people's behavior led to explorations and learning. She encouraged the child's curiosity, guiding her with patience, answering questions, and nurturing a sense of wonder and confidence. The father observed these moments with quiet satisfaction, grateful for the supportive presence that enriched both their lives. It was a subtle demonstration of how relationships, when grounded in care and attention, could foster growth, learning, and emotional stability. As the weekend drew to a close, they packed their belongings, but the sense of peace and connection lingered. The journey back to the city was quieter, filled with reflective conversation and occasional laughter. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, gratitude, and inspiration. Witnessing the father's devotion, the little girl's growth, and the evolving dynamic of their relationship had reinforced her belief in the transformative power of empathy, trust, and kindness. Returning to their daily routines, the bonds forged during the retreat continued to influence their interactions. Shared experiences, both significant and seemingly ordinary, had strengthened the mutual respect, understanding, and warmth that defined their relationship. She found herself approaching work, social interactions, and personal challenges with a deeper sense of empathy and patience. The experience reinforced her understanding that meaningful relationships were nurtured over time through consistent care, attention, and authentic connection. In the weeks that followed, subtle changes became apparent. She noticed the little girl's growing confidence and curiosity, the father's continued dedication to nurturing his daughter while managing professional responsibilities, and the ongoing depth of their mutual trust. Small gestures, shared moments, and thoughtful conversations continued to strengthen the bonds they had formed. These interactions were not driven by obligation or expectation, but by genuine care, mutual respect, and the shared understanding that human connection was both precious and transformative. Through these experiences, she gained profound insight into the nature of relationships, kindness, and personal growth. She understood that life's most meaningful connections often arose from simple acts of generosity and empathy. She saw how these bonds could extend beyond initial circumstances, influencing personal and professional life in ways that were enduring and deeply impactful. The father, the daughter, and she had become intertwined in a web of trust, support, and shared humanity, illustrating the quiet but powerful effects of compassion and connection. Even as life continued with its daily responsibilities and challenges, the memory of that first night remained a guiding force. The spontaneous act of helping strangers had evolved into a complex, meaningful relationship that brought joy, perspective, and emotional growth to all involved. She felt gratitude for the journey, the lessons learned, and the enduring presence of these connections in her life. It was a reminder that small acts of kindness could ripple through time, creating profound and lasting effects, and that true human connection was built not on circumstance or status, but on empathy, trust, and the courage to care. As the seasons changed, bringing new experiences and challenges, the bonds they had formed continued to provide strength, guidance, and comfort. She embraced the understanding that life's richness was often found in relationships, in the small gestures of care, and in the shared moments that illuminated the beauty of human connection. And in this understanding, she found a lasting sense of fulfillment, hope, and gratitude, knowing that the story of that night and the relationships it had fostered would continue to shape her life in profound, meaningful ways for years to come.